Hi, I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. We have an excellent episode for you today, folks. So it has just been a few days since Mark Carney has assembled his cabinet, this ragtag crew of recycled liberals. It looks exactly the same as the Trudeau cabinet. There's a few new sort of star cabinet ministers, and yet they are each a disaster. Each one is worse than the other. So anytime one of these people gets up in front of a microphone, speaks to reporters, the whole game is given away. The whole idea that this has changed, that this represents some kind of new government, it is the exact same as the previous government. And we are going to go through that today. Absolutely stunning news. We learned that we will not have a budget this year, that Canada will not table a budget, which means no hope of a cabinet, of a confidence vote, no threat to the Carney government that they could go down before they even start. We will show you all of the dirty tricks that the Liberal government is rolling out already. And I'm very pleased today to be joined by Wyatt Claypool. Wyatt is a political commentator and founder of the National Telegraph based in Calgary. Wyatt, thank you so much for joining the show.
Absolutely. I usually don't like talking about budget, so maybe Mark Carney did this for me because it makes it simpler to talk about. But
Well,
yeah, you'd think that the master businessman and the man who's worked as the governor of the Bank of Canada in England would be able to at least do the finances properly. They're not going to be great, but they're, filed and formatted properly, but I guess not.
Well, it's just a total abdication of any responsibility. Like, how are you supposed to have any accountability? How are you supposed to be held to account by the opposition if you're not even providing the basic information? So let's just play this clip. This is Finance Minister Francois Philippe Champagne speaking to CTV's Vasi Capellos, where he just sort of lets it out, lets this bombshell out that no, Canada will not be getting a budget this year. Let's play that clip.
I want to ask you explicitly, will there be an actual budget in 2025?
There will be a fall economic statement when we're coming back.
How are we as Canadians to hold your government accountable for what you're promising if you're not going to be transparent about it for 6 months or so? And I take your point about the timeline, throne speech. There's still another month.
And I would say this is a new government. So let's start, if we're going to start, this is a new government, new legislature, new prime minister. So the direction is very clear. He's been
But you're still the finance minister.
Yeah, I'm still the finance minister. And I would say the world has changed also in 6 weeks. So Canadians understand that.
Canadians understand it. Okay, so let's go to X. Table Salt points this out. Countries that are not doing an annual budget in 2025 include Afghanistan under the Taliban, North Korea, the Palestinian Authority under Hamas, Iraq, Iran, etc., and yet Canada will not be doing one. Well, Poilievre issued a statement saying this. First, he said, Parliament has already been shut down for nearly half a year. Now, in the face of serious economic threats, the Liberals don't intend to present a budget this year. There is no roadmap forward, no economic vision, no willingness to lead. This is not the leadership Mark Carney promised. It's an abandonment. Okay, and then he was also speaking to reporters earlier this morning, Wyatt, and here is what he had to say.
Mr. Carney said during the election campaign that he had a plan. And he took great delight in saying that a slogan is not a plan. Well, a budget is a plan. And if he does indeed have a plan, if he does know what he's doing, then he would introduce a budget so that Canadians know exactly what the finances are.
And just one final piece of context that I wanted to add here, Wyatt, which is that we didn't really get one last year either. Philippe Francois Champagne said that that they had a fall economic update, but because they prorogued Parliament, parts of that were never approved. You can recall that in the middle of the election campaign, this bombshell was dropped. This is from an account called Canada Spends, and I just want to point this out, that it is run by a Liberal, right? This is not a right-wing account. This is run by someone who used to work in the Trudeau government, who is just sick and tired of governments spending like there's no tomorrow. So this is what the account writes. The government approved $40 billion in spending from April 1st to May 15th through a special warrant. This was done because Parliament is prorogued and it's not possible to make appropriations. The only information shared with Canadians is a list of departments and the total amount. According to the document, the appropriate ministers have reported that the payment of these sums is urgently required for the public good. We'll leave it here for you to decide. And then they screenshot all of the amounts that each ministry received, right? And there's just no accountability. They never voted on this. In our parliamentary system, you're supposed to vote to approve budgets. You're supposed to vote to approve spending. We didn't have that. And it looks like we're just not going to have it again. I mean, if the Conservatives were doing this, it would be a huge national scandal. And every single news outlet, news agency, and journalist in the legacy media would be like sounding the alarm. And the Liberals are doing it, and they're just sort of getting away with it. It's unbelievable that this is the state of Canada under the Liberals in 2025. What do you make of all this, Wyatt?
What I have to point out a few things about this. One, it's completely asinine for Champagne to say, well, it's been a weird last 6 weeks, so now we don't have to table a budget. Like, we have tabled budgets in far bigger crises than we are currently in. We're not even really in a crisis. The whole trade war is kind of resolved. There's kind of a blanket, tariff that Donald Trump has put on pretty much any imports. So that should be very easily baked in to our budget. But again, like, we've been able to put together budgets in far worse scenarios. Based on this, they could just never pass a budget, because if this is considered something unprecedented, we're living in unprecedented times and we have to wait 6 months. Are times going to stop being unprecedented by this standard in 6 months, and now they can finally pass a budget? And yeah, they did. Like, the last time they did this was in COVID, where they didn't pass a budget in 2020. So that was considered like a really big deal then. Are we even in a 2020 scenario right now where they're going to have to budget people staying home and not actually working anymore? Like, obviously not. And then consider on top of this that we've already had a credit downgrade under the final year of Justin Trudeau, as well as Mark Carney's advisorship over the economy. So why are we thinking that this is not going to result in us going from, I believe we went from AAA to AA plus. We could end up just going to AA over the next year or so, because we're not taking any steps to make any credit rating agency think that we're actually trying to get back on the horse. We just don't seem to care. And also, with the OIC, $33 billion that the government spent, both them and their defenders at the CBC tried to make it seem like, no, this is just to bridge the gap before we table the budget in a few weeks. And I already knew that was nonsense, because you'd only need about 5% of your budget for each department to be given to them to bridge a gap for a couple weeks and then put forward a budget. I noticed that the CBC, in that readout of where money went, was given $178 billion. Now, they get about $1 billion of their budget every single year for taxpayers, so why do they need 17.8% of their budget given to them all at once if this is just to bridge the gap? It was obviously to give money strategically to departments that the government favored, with a little bit of money to bridge the gap, until they give out more money in an OIC. And this is going to be probably a way of baiting and switching Canadians, where you can kind of give small lump sums of money all year long through OICs, and it's going to be very difficult for the average citizen to be able to kind of keep up with, well, how much has each department been given? Because in theory, he could give the CBC, as an example, $2 billion, but it's in 5 billion, 10 billion, 50 billion chunks as time goes on. And it allows them to basically spend like it's a credit card, rather than actually having to, follow a budget like a responsible household or business would do. I don't know. But Mark Carney's good at this, I've been told by Rosemary Barton.
Well, you're so right. Like, I think it's designed to just completely avoid accountability, right? If you pass a budget, it has to be approved. It has to be passed in a confidence vote, and that puts the government at risk of falling before they've even really gotten going. And so it avoids them having to cobble together a plurality or like a coalition to get to a majority, and it just allows them to continue as they go. And to the point about the crisis, right? Like, I was told that Mark Carney was great in a crisis. I was told that that is how he thrives. And so yet here we are in the first week really of his government. And he's saying, his finance minister's out there saying that, no, it's too rushed. We can't put together a budget. Like, the basic core duty of a government is to do that. And yet this man that's supposed to be like always under pressure and in a crisis is basically shrugging and saying, we just can't do it, maybe next year. It's really unbelievable. Okay, I want to keep going on, because that was just that's just dipping our toe in the water of the complete disaster show that is this cabinet so far. So as well, yesterday, speaking to reporters in Ottawa, Canada's new housing minister, this is a new face federally, although those of us from British Columbia know this man very well as the socialist mayor of Vancouver, Mr. Bikelines himself. And here he is, Gregor Robertson, the new housing minister, saying that no, our goal is not to actually lower housing prices to make it more affordable for young people to be able to afford their first home. No. We want to keep the prices sky high. We just want to build more, and hey, throw in some government housing in there. Let's play this clip.
affordable housing. Delivering that. No, I think that we need to deliver more supply, make sure the market is stable. It's a huge part of our economy. We need to be delivering more affordable housing.
I think it shows that he doesn't know the first thing about economics, right? Because he's saying, like, the question to him is, do you want housing prices to go down? He says, no, we just have to stable them by increasing supply. Well, the whole idea is that if you do increase the supply to match the demand, the prices will automatically go down because there won't be such a shortage, right? The costs have gone up because there's an artificial shortage in housing because we've flooded the country with new immigrants at the same time as just refusing to really grow to keep up with the growth. And here, like, this is also something that drives me crazy about these socialist types, is that they think that the answer is like a government program, right? So he says we need more affordable housing. I mean, read into that. They want more rentals that are subsidized, right? They want like price controls on rentals so that some families who get into this program can afford to pay the rent because it's artificially lowered by the government. That doesn't solve the problem of young Canadians getting locked out of the housing market. That doesn't solve the problem of people not being able to find a house in a safe neighborhood to raise their families. Like, to me, this is just going to be an absolute disaster putting someone like Gregor Robertson in the housing portfolio. What do you think, Wyatt?
Well, it's like Mark Carney saw like Sean Fraser as housing minister, and when someone thought there couldn't be possibly anyone worse for that role, he said, "Hold my beer," and he ended up finding this guy, dragging him out of retirement, saying, "This will make sure that people are confident that our government's going to do a good job." And here, they kicked out Nate Erskine-Smith as housing minister when he only came back to run for re-election under the promise that they would let him be housing minister. Now, I disagree with Nate Erskine-Smith on pretty much everything. At the same time, it's like Mark Carney is a career politician in the sense that he may have not been in office for very long, but he has a lot of the flaws that you would normally associate with a really bad quality, like career politician. He wants to be around people in his government that he likes to talk to and that he pairs up with well. It doesn't matter if they're incompetent. He just picks people he's friends with, and maybe he doesn't jive very well with Nate, so Nate's not in, and now Gregor Roberts gets in because maybe Mark Carney knew him from back in the day. So his cabinet at best is full of dumb and pretty people that he likes to hang out with, but we don't actually have anyone who has a track record of success in any field. And sometimes they're even moving up to more complicated departments.
Well, plucking the former mayor of Vancouver, I mean, Vancouver is like ground zero, like patient zero in terms of unaffordable housing. Like it's the least affordable housing market in the country. The rest of the country is starting to catch up to Vancouver, but Vancouver has been dealing with this problem since Gregor Robertson has been mayor, if not that thereafter. Okay, let's go
By
ahead.
the way, though, the prices in Vancouver spiked like 178% or something crazy, like more than double, when he was mayor during the housing crash. He somehow increased prices during the housing crash. That is some sort of wizardry.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what happens again when you have your borders completely open and you allow like speculative investors from foreign countries to just swoop in and buy single family homes. And then the regulations are so tight that you won't allow anything different to be built. Okay, I want to move on to Stephen Guilbeault because many people might have like breathed a sigh of relief that this guy is no longer the environment minister. He has been given a new portfolio called the Canadian Identity Minister. Okay. And yet, when he was speaking to reporters yesterday, he just couldn't help himself. Why? He couldn't help himself. And he doubled down on his crazed environmentalism, saying that there is no appetite, that investors will simply not pay for new pipelines. Let's play that clip.
Before we start talking about building an entire new pipeline, maybe we should maximize the use of existing infrastructure. And the Canadian Energy Regulator, as well as the International Energy Agency, are telling us that probably by 2028, 2029, demand for oil will peak globally, and it will also peak in Canada. So as far as I know, there are no investors right now. There are no companies that are saying that they want to build an east-west pipeline. And as you know, these things are built by companies.
Man, this guy's living in the past. I haven't heard that phrase peak oil, I think, since like the 2000s, right? But he's repeating all of the old favorite scaremongering from the far left. So Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, jumped in on that one. She writes this on X. She says, Canada's new identity minister, Stephen Guilbeault, just deceived Canadians, saying we don't need more pipelines because the Trans Mountain pipeline is only 40% full and peak oil will be here in 2 years. The facts are that TMX, which just opened and wouldn't have been built entirely, and would have been built entirely with private sector dollars if Ottawa hadn't made it impossible for the original proponent to build it, is already close to capacity. Further, most estimates of demand for bitumen shows it growing for several decades and that it will be needed to replace declining U.S. conventional oil fields. This is just another example of how misleading and destructive this former environment minister was to Alberta's and Canada's economy and investment climate. We ask for the new environment minister to disavow these comments and commit to working with Alberta to build new pipelines to access markets. Why on earth is this fool talking about pipelines? Like, he was removed from that portfolio. Mark Carney is out there presumably saying to people in Alberta, like, cool, like, it's okay, we're going to be more pro energy and more pro pipelines than the predecessors. And yet he has this guy out here speaking like that. What do you make of it, Wyatt?
Well, the fact he feels like he can speak about it so confidently means it's probably a shared view within cabinet. If he was taken aside and says, like, you are on this new file, you cannot talk about this anymore, you wouldn't probably talk about it. He's doing this because this is probably just the common belief that's within cabinet. Also, this is just what I would consider like a Maxwell Fawcett-ism of whenever you're trying to, like, run down the oil and gas industry, you just pretend there's no business case for it. In this case, he's just lying about the 40% capacity. But whenever, like, oh, well, an oil and gas project didn't go forward, or this oil and gas company just shut down. See, there's no business case. It's like, wow, I can't believe that when you shoot the industry in the head, it might actually have a bit of a headache and a little bit harder time being able to get going over the next few years. At the same time, these people are totally fine with subsidizing renewable green energy projects everywhere, despite the fact that they would never have any investment unless the government was backing it up with subsidies at the same time, oftentimes giving them way more money in subsidies than they're actually having to even invest in the project.
We're going to get to that in a few minutes when we get to Melanie Joly and her comments. But I just want to follow up once more on these Stéphane Guilbeault comments. So earlier, Danielle Smith had also raised her concerns with his predecessor, with his successor, who's the newly appointed Environment Minister, Julie Dabrusin. Smith writes this. She says they put out a release yesterday saying not only is she a self-proclaimed architect of the designation of plastics as toxic, but she is a staunch advocate against the oil sands, a proponent of phasing out oil and gas. And for the last 4 years, she served as the right hand to former Environment Minister and militant environmentalist Stéphane Guilbeault. So yes, Smith asked her to disavow Guilbeault, but presumably she won't. They're part of the same team, and she served as his deputy when he was the Environment Minister. Just earlier this morning, we also had Pierre Poilievre commenting on this. So speaking to reporters in Ottawa, Poilievre responded directly to these claims from Stéphane Guilbeault. Let's play that clip.
I just find it astonishing that Mr. Carney would appoint a man who says we don't need any pipelines built. The Liberals went around the country pretending they had changed their minds about pipelines after 10 years of blocking them. But now one of Mr. Carney's top ministers comes out and says we don't need any more pipelines, and that he would work to block those pipelines.
So really just saying what needs to be said here. Okay, I want to move on, Wyatt, because we also have Anita Anand, who is the new Foreign Affairs Minister. And I think she really put her foot in her mouth when she talks about what is happening in Israel and Gaza. She basically blames everything, right? The entire war on Israel. Let's play that clip.
Israel's blocking food and aid to Gaza. What do you think of that decision? And is the Canadian government doing anything to stop that?
We cannot allow the continued use of food as a political tool. The Prime Minister has been very clear about that. Over 50,000 people have died as a result of the aggression caused against the Palestinian and the Gazan people in Palestine, and using food as a political tool is simply unacceptable.
So you have to be so careful with your words when you're a minister. I didn't like that question at all, blaming Israel for so-called like blocking food and aid against the Palestinians, when everyone knows what's going on. Look, I'm not a fan of war. I don't want that war to continue. I think that enough is enough. But we've seen Hamas. They steal the aid, right? We know what they do, right? So this idea that Israel is to blame, and she says that these people have died as a result of aggression caused against them. Well, where did that aggression come from? It came from the October 7th attacks, obviously. And again, just the way it's framed, pretty gross. One more for you here, Wyatt, which is that Chrystia Freeland, the woman that just won't go away. I mistakenly said that she was put back as the Minister of Trade on the show. I think it was yesterday. She's actually interprovincial trade. So it is a huge demotion, right? She went from Trade Minister up to Foreign Affairs Minister, up to Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, and now all the way back down the ladder to interprovincial trade. But that's okay. Chrystia Freeland is taking it all in stride. Here she is saying that they're going to make trade sexy again. Let's play this clip.
I'm especially excited about internal trade. This is something that Canadian economists, Canadian geeks have been talking about for decades. Entire books have been written about it. The IMF has estimated that lifting all barriers to internal trade will add as much as 4% to our GDP. That is a lot, and we need it right now. And I really believe this is a moment we can get it done. Internal trade has become sexy. It has.
So cringe. What do you
She's
think?
also the
Wyatt?
Minister of Transport. Maybe they threw Speed Racer into that role because of her driving abilities out in Alberta.
Honestly, this just like every clip is worse than the last one. It's unbelievable that all of these
It's
incompetent
just turned
people
into
back.
Veep. It's just turned into Yes Minister and Veep. The whole thing is just people who are just not very good at their jobs saying kind of flowery, idealistic things right before like face planting into the ground when it comes to their actual job performance. Like none of these people, like Anita Anand back with the Israel question, it's like be an adult. Figure out how to this is I meet a lot of incompetent politicians and everyone and you're just sitting there like, "Oh my goodness, someone in your office is holding your hand every day because you can't even think on your feet for the most basic thing you should say for this question. How are you going to actually how are you going to engage in any diplomacy as the foreign affairs minister, or how are you going to do any sign an interprovincial trade deal when you seem like you couldn't actually get through a normal question period without falling all over yourself?
Okay, speaking of Veep, I think this might be the best Veep clip of the day. This comes from our new Innovation, Science, and Industry Minister, Melanie Joly, sounding just like a total idiot here. So she's asked about the potential plant closures when it comes to auto plants vis-a-vis the tariffs, and she's just really excited about the government's plan here in the wake of really bad news. Let's play this clip.
So I've already been in contact with the CEOs of GM, Ford, and also Stellantis. My goal is to be able to have good conversations with them before the end of the week. My message to the workers in the auto sector is we're there for you. We know that there's anxiety. We know you're concerned about losing shifts. We know we were concerned about losing your jobs, and we will always fight for your jobs. Notwithstanding that, we also have a $2 billion worth of support for the industry, the auto industry, the steel and aluminum industries that are affected by the trade war. One of my first decisions will be also to make sure that the workers can benefit from these investments. Merci. Merci.
I can never tell with her whether she's just really nervous and can barely make it through a sentence because she's just so bad at this, or if maybe she's on drugs or something. I don't know. What do you think, Wyatt?
Well, just platitudes. They're just platitudes. Oh, I've been sitting down with GM, Stellantis, and who cares? Who cares? Did you get anything from those meetings? Do you have any plan to cut taxes? Really, 80% of the time, whenever somebody is talking who's in government, who's a minister, if they're not talking about tax reductions, they're just screwing up everything. Every single department in the government right now should just be figuring out ways of reducing taxes, reducing regulatory burden if you're scared of jobs being sucked over the border into the United States. But all these people are like, we talked with Stellantis. Who cares? Who cares that you had a cup of coffee with them? I don't think that actually does. We're fighting for workers. How about you cut the workers' taxes? Like, I never understand why this is like a dirty word in government. Like, I know Mark Carney's technically cutting taxes right now, but I don't think exactly giving everyone $400 back is going to save the economy.
Well, it's so interesting because it's the exact opposite approach, as you mentioned earlier, to pipelines, right? So when it comes to pipelines, there's like, oh, well, we just create all these regulations and there's no business case. The businesses just don't want to build these pipelines in Canada anymore. That's not our fault. That's their fault, right? Completely ignoring all of their own policies. And yet when it comes to auto manufacturers, it's like they're literally just bribing them with our money, paying them untold billions and billions of dollars to please keep your businesses in Canada so that we can have jobs for these people. And even with all those subsidies over the years, the companies are like, yeah, no, you're not a good business environment. Like, it's like, hello, it is your regulations and your taxes that drive these people away. No amount of special subsidies is going to keep them. And just for some background, I mean, oh, sorry, just one more point about her. That she's just like super excited about their $2 billion like EI basically top up fund. Like, I'm sorry, if you're about to lose your job, the fact that they have $2 billion, like that's not going to go very far when you're talking about tens of thousands of laid off employees, right? It doesn't really help you. Like, you don't want welfare, you want a job, right? And so
It's a
the
real
whole idea that she's
civilization building policy to keep people at home on their couches.
well, it's terrible, right? And so, yeah, if you are an auto worker, you should be nervous under this government and you should be angry with your compatriots for voting in another Liberal government. And obviously, the background here is that we learned that this Honda plant is closing. So, Gen Xer on X reminded us here's Justin Trudeau post saying Honda, Stellantis, Northvolt, Volkswagen, Ashai, and Kasai, these are big companies that can choose to build anywhere, and they're choosing Canada. Well, how's that going? He writes, so how are these Liberal investments going? Northvolt just went bankrupt. Honda shelved its EV project for 2 years. Stellantis halted production, shifted 1,500 jobs to Illinois. Volkswagen battery plant is now facing major delays. Billions of dollars in taxpayer money are circling in the drain. And who was likely behind many of these investments, advising Justin Trudeau every step of the way? All that, of course, would be Mark Carney, your new prime minister. Like, this strategy is just a failed strategy. Let's stop with the corporate welfare. Let's stop bribing these companies. This is kind of part of the reason that got us into this whole mess with President Trump, Wyatt, is that Canada just loves to subsidize different industries. And that is what Trump is talking about when he says that countries like Canada are cheating. It's like, yeah, we are paying all of this taxpayer money to try to prop up America's competition. And he's saying, I'm going to combat that with tariffs. And yet Canada's response is just to do more of the same. What do you think?
Well, and it's letting the Americans take our jobs in the long run, in the sense that it's honestly what happened in the American auto industry in the 70s. When you when you protect an industry and you subsidize it for decades, and that industry is allowed to become inefficient and bloated, unions end up taking over the entire labor side of the industry, and then suddenly there's increased competition, like the Americans are pushing us for, or at least they'll tariff us back because we're effectively subsidizing our own industry to keep it here. Well, the whole thing is going to evaporate in a second, because the thing is not actually built on like a solid foundation. It's built just on subsidies that can burn up in a second. It's just built on, like easy money. People will rather go and build a company in a place that's going to be more stable in the long run, even if we're offering money, because it's too much of a headache. Taxes keep going up, or regulations keep going up in this country. So even if when you get money, you require more money every single year to stick around. They can't just keep giving $1 billion every single year to a car company. They got to give 1.2 billion, 1.4 billion the next year and the next year, because the Liberals can only ever justify more rules, more regulations, more taxes, whatnot, like that.
Okay, I want to end the show on a fun note. We're going to move entirely away from Canadian politics and go to something totally different. So Brett Cooper, who is a YouTuber and sort of former Daily Wire personality, a young Gen Z conservative, she has been doing a tour, and she was at a show in Phoenix, Arizona last weekend. And I want to play this clip because I just think it is so remarkable for so many reasons. So first, let's play this clip of Brett Cooper in Phoenix, Arizona.
Because what I'm about to do tonight, I've never done before, ever. I'm literally like shaking right now. But I think that you guys should know that the special guest is already on stage.
So I'll tell you why I love this, right? This is a young, successful, sort of career-oriented Gen Z woman. And yet when she announces to her fans and to her audience that she's pregnant, she gets this like huge, like heroes applaud. Like people are so happy for her, right? And this is the kind of response that you would tend to get from like your friend group or your family when you tell them you're pregnant, if you have been like really trying to get pregnant. And to me, it signals like this cultural shift, right? Like for me and millennials, it seems like everything that was told to us, all the messaging from the culture was like girl boss, go into you could achieve anything, go into any line of work, and career, career, career. And I think that the culture is shifting and that women are being told that it's a great thing to be a mother and that our culture is celebrating it again. I'm really excited and happy for young women like Brett Cooper for sort of like paving this new path that yes, there's like no shame in being a mother. Actually, it's like the most wonderful, amazing thing. And so seeing this reaction from her audience brought me a lot of joy. What do you think, Wyatt?
Well, I'll agree with everything you said, but then also counter by saying I'm the most socially awkward person I know. So I was watching that, I was like, okay, well, I don't know what to do with this information. I'd be like the person in the back, like, I guess that's good. Like, I don't know. People tell me good news, and I just like shut down. I'm like, okay, I guess so.
Cool.
But
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
it's also kind of funny because she's like, she doesn't really look pregnant, right? She's probably like just maybe a few months along. But I think she was thinking that she looked huge because when you're pregnant, you always feel like you're bigger than you are. So I think she was expecting it to be really obvious when she turned to the side, but she doesn't really have a baby bump yet. So that was just another tidbit to make you feel even more awkward, Wyatt.
yeah, it is a cultural shift in the sense that that's probably something that someone would mention in like decades ago, and that would be like a big celebration for someone who's like a news anchor or something like that. But these days, it's kind of considered like that's gross. But like I don't tell me about that, or people don't like the subject of like kids because they don't want any adult subject being brought up because that might make them feel like they're they actually need to take their lives more seriously. But people are actually taking their lives more seriously in their the 20s now, which is good.
It's absolutely a good, and I think that it's great for the culture. Okay, Wyatt, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time as Wyatt Claypool of the National Telegraph. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you, and God bless.